That's so cool. I'm on the screen. Okay, technology.
Yeah. Hi guys. So I'm with Michaela Runkle.
Yes.
She is newly authored
In publishing. Yeah, we're getting there.
Almost there. And we're just going to talk about kind of how she survived her domestic abuse situation.
Yeah.
And I'm really going to focus on the fitness aspects of that and how strength kind of helped her through that.
Yeah.
So if you guys have questions, there's nobody in here right now, but if you have questions, go ahead and ask those and we'll answer those at the end.
Sounds like a plan.
So I'm going to link a video to the talk you did on last Tuesday. That very in-depth went into your situation. But briefly, just go ahead and let everyone kind of know about your situation, kind of what you're advocating. And
Of course, yeah. So I am a survivor of domestic violence. I became a survivor right after I graduated college. So it was literally the day after I took my last college final. I was in an altercation with my college boyfriend. And there was alcohol involved in his part, and it was an isolated incident that I never expected to be a part of. And immediately after the altercation, I had a concussion, so it was pretty severe, but I hit judgment from family and colleagues, and I wasn't expecting that as a young survivor. I was expecting, well, one, I never expected to be in this situation, but as a young survivor, I never imagined that I would get rejection, that I would be the one that would receive the judgment, not my ex. My ex's friends and family fully surrounded him and supported him. But for me, I was receiving questions such as, how did you get yourself into this situation? How could you fall in love with somebody that was toxic? And I mean, my wounds were so fresh, but it just felt like that judgment was more painful than the actual altercation and the actual bruises on my face. So I went through a period of just identity crisis and struggle, and it was just a situation I never imagined I would be in. But this past spring, I got accepted into a PhD program, which I was so excited about. Thank you. But I realized that I haven't been clinically diagnosed, but self-diagnosed with PTSD, and I knew I had some, I like to use the word quirks, and I don't know why. I think PTSD community would say triggers, but not having officially been diagnosed, I use the word quirks. I have some quirks that I knew would hurt me professionally if I didn't examine them and take a look at them. So I actually just started writing my story to find out where I still needed healing at, like where are there still gaps in my story. And as I was writing, I realized that I had a message to share with young survivors, with people that don't necessarily have a community yet, and or are facing those walls of judgment that society and family and friend relationships might put on them. And so I went and spoke with one of my professors, and I said, like, hey, I have this book, I have this story. I know this is kind of awkward because this is a professional relationship, but do you think I can get this out there? And she, to this day, is one of my biggest advocates. And so essentially I'm writing this book and sharing my message so other people can find peace, and they can find a community that they don't have to put on a fabricated image that they have it all together. They can be themselves.
And so when you're going throughout this process and writing those letters,
yeah.
At what point did you feel like you should share this with other people?
Yeah, so it was in the back of my mind from the beginning. Actually, it had been on my mind for about a year before I started writing that I wanted to be an advocate to some capacity.
Okay.
We tried. Technology. It's hard. So I knew I wanted to be an advocate, but I didn't know what that looked like exactly. So once I started writing, I don't know, I've always enjoyed writing, but for the first time in my life, I felt freedom after the altercation, when I was immersing myself in those pages and those words in my story and finding personal healing. And I know not every single person's story is exactly the same, but I honestly, what I wanted after the altercation was somebody just to hold my hand and say that they understood. And I couldn't find anybody that could do that for me, to say that they they knew what I had gone through. They understood what it was like to have the person you love put bruises on your face and destroy your body. And so as I was writing, I had the end goal of just helping one person. And those moments when I was writing, when it became uncomfortably vulnerable, whatever it may be, I just imagined the 22-year-old version of myself, like laying on the bathroom floor, bruises on her face, just lost and confused. And every time I had that picture of myself in mind, I just kept writing, and I knew I had to share this with the world. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah.
As a fellow survivor, it definitely helped me feel comfortable expressing what happened to me.
That's so great.
And, so I shared that on Instagram a few days ago, and I just had great feedback from it. So I wanted to thank you for kind of inspiring me to feel comfortable enough sharing that with my followers.
I'm so proud of you. I'm glad the feedback has been uplifting and supporting. So
yeah. Sorry. Kind of being that kind of switch role where you necessarily don't think of domestic abuse as a female to a male type of thing. I always just kept it to myself because I felt like I would get judgment about it, and people would kind of, judge me as being less of a man for having that happen to me. And so just kind of putting that out there and being comfortable with it being out there for everyone to read is something I have to thank you for.
I just wanted you a hug. I'm so glad you were able to put it out there. But there's, I guess I had never considered this platform that we share before I was in this situation, but I didn't realize how many stereotypes are around domestic violence. So definitely it being a female only, however you articulate that stereotype of females only being the survivors, I think is one of the biggest stereotypes, because majority of the survivors that I've interacted with are male. And then other stereotypes, so one of the first things I did after the altercation was I Googled, how does one become a survivor? Like, what is domestic violence? I was just so confused. I needed an answer. And everything I saw on the internet, it was families of extreme poverty, families that had really low socioeconomic statuses or education levels, whatever it may be. And I had just graduated college, and granted I wasn't rich by any stretch of the imagination, like living paycheck to paycheck with my little one-bedroom apartment. But nonetheless, there were just so many stereotypes around it. And how do you begin to find healing when you feel like society says you shouldn't have this platform? It's confusing.
Yeah. So how long after the incident did you start writing?
So it happened May 2017, and I just started writing this past spring, so almost 2 years.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And what made you write them as letters? That's fascinating.
Yeah, so the entire book is structured in a letter format. So in the book, I renamed my ex to be Adam. So in the book, it's Dear Adam, and I write an entire story, and then sign off, essentially, love always, Michaela, is kind of my closing comments, and I've been using that on social media. But I really just wanted a place of transparency that I could share in my heart how I was perceiving the situation. And I didn't think I could do that in a story format, but I wanted to dialogue directly with the individual. So I think, honestly, I sat down and I wrote the first letter, and it was the altercation. So I sat down and I wrote, Dear Adam, and then I wrote my story on my side of the altercation. And I was like, well, now I have a letter from my mom in this situation. Like, how are you a parent of a young survivor? And so, yeah, that's how the letter format came to be. And I just started writing to people.
And how many letters did you end up writing?
Oh, that's a good question. I actually don't even know the answer. Maybe 100.
Okay.
There's a lot of letters in there.
I look forward to reading it.
I'm so excited to share it.
Okay, so part of your story is finding powerlifting, strength training to begin with.
Oh,
right?
for sure, yeah.
Tell me about that experience. I know you walked into a gym one day.
Yeah.
And then just go ahead and share that part of your story.
So it was a couple months after the altercation, after my concussion had started to heal, and I knew I never wanted to be in a domestic violence altercation again. So initially, a friend suggested that I do the Jujitsu route. I learned self-defense, etc. So I actually went to a Jujitsu gym first, and I was terrified the very first day, and it was the first time that I had seen bodies being physical in altercation, and it was the first time that, I don't know if you call it anxiety or whatever it might be, but it was the first time that I had like shortness of breath. So I was like, oh my goodness, what are these people doing? Are they going to hurt me? And so I wandered over to the group of girls, and I was like, oh, can you be nice to me? Like, you're my size. But there was no way that I was going to hold
Was Aubrey there?
She was, yeah. You know Aubrey?
Yeah.
Oh,
we're
so
good friends,
sweet.
so we go back, and then Justin, the owner.
Yeah.
We trained together for a very
Oh,
long time.
right
so,
on.
Yeah.
But they talked me into competing, which was nerve-wracking, and so it was a friendly competition here in Indianapolis, and I surprisingly did quite well with the PTSD. I ended up winning my second match with an armbar, which I didn't even know what an armbar was like 2 months before that. But yeah, and I think I placed second or third overall. But it was too much for me psychologically. Physically, I was like having to move my body. The self-defense was amazing, but psychologically, it was too much. So I saw the value in it, and I'm forever grateful to Performex and Jujitsu and my coaches. It was an amazing experience, but at the time, it was still too fresh. I couldn't handle it. So I wandered into the weight room at IUPUI, and I was so surprised they didn't kick me out on the first day, because I was standing in the back of the weight room with like my water bottle, and I was just taking in the environment, like, so you put the bar like on your back, how do you do this exactly? And I was just standing there, maybe like 20 or 30 minutes. I was standing there a long time. And then I finally worked up the courage to walk over to a squat rack. And I'm like, okay, you put it on your back and you pretend like you're sitting. And so I think I maybe did a quarter squat and bounced back up, and the bar is only 45, and I did like 5 reps. And like, yeah, that's a good workout. I like re-racked my bar and I went home for the day.
The first time, yeah, putting the bar on your back's scary for some people.
I had never had weight on my back, period. And so I was like, you know what, that's a good start.
So that was like your first ever workout, or did you work out previously before that? Or?
So I played softball in high school, and then a little bit in college. I played about a year and a half. No, lies. I played about like 3/4 of a year in college, and then halfway through the season, I ended up hurting my back. I had a disc herniation, so stopped playing. But I was a pitcher, so they wanted the long muscles, not the bulky muscles, so they never really let me lift. So it was always like hip workouts or whatever it might be. So pretty much the first time I ever touched a weight. And yeah, so I wandered in, and I didn't realize, I mean, you get this because you're in the fitness realm, and I'm sure everybody listening gets it as well, but when you can start to add weight onto the bar, it was the most empowering thing that I think I've ever experienced in my entire life. And I remember the day that I hit 135 for the first time. It wasn't too long after I started lifting, within 6 months, and I went down with the weight, but then as I was pushing back up, these tears just formed in my eyes, just giant tears welled up. And I'm not much of a crier, so that was shocking. I'm like, what's happening to my body? But I ended up clearing the squat and racking my weight, and I just flood of tears, because in that moment I knew if I could train my body to squat 135, I could be a person that would never be beaten to the ground again. I could be strong enough to never have bruises on my face again. And so for me, that was what I define as the moment I turned from a victim to a survivor. So
it's a beautiful moment.
It was, I think about it quite a bit actually.
So you've kind of built this strength physically, and that kind of helped you as well as kind of emotional strength as well.
For sure. Yeah.
At what point in your journey, because you did return to your ex during that time.
I did.
At what point in your kind of timeline of resistance training and building that strength up were you able to kind of leave that situation?
Yeah, so I definitely hit my 135 mark while I was still with him. So to elaborate on the psychology of why I went back, because I feel like that's often missed in conversation. So immediately after the altercation, as I alluded to, there were these painful moments of rejection and judgment that I received, and having been confused and questioning my identity and my life purpose at that point, I didn't know what to do. I felt like the ground had been ripped out underneath me, and there was a knife in my soul, and it was an invisible knife, so I didn't know how to remove it, but I knew I was in pain. So I ran back to what was comfortable. I needed some sort of normalcy in my life, and from an outsider looking in, it would be so easy to see the situation as a clear-cut solution. You just get out, like, you just run. But for me, he wasn't the bad guy. He made a mistake, sure, of course, but he was also the man that I fell in love with. He was the man I thought I was going to marry and would be the father of my future children, and I had no doubt in my mind about that. And so it was really hard for me to see this shift overnight of my comfort with my person to the bad guy, the enemy in my story. And it was easy for everybody else to see, but when you're in that moment, I couldn't see it. So yeah, there was definitely a psychological shift as I started lifting. I realized that I could be strong without him, physically and mentally. And I don't think there was a defining moment where I realized, you know, like, I can't be with him anymore, whatever it may be. But it was rather about 9 months after the altercation. It was a really peaceful, like, January morning. It was a Saturday morning, and we just sat down for a cup of coffee, and I expressed, you know, I just, as a person, I don't think this is a healthy relationship. I don't think I can grow to my full potential as a human in this relationship. I think I need to spend some time by myself, being Michaela, being single, and figuring out who I am as a person, because I've never had that opportunity. And that was closure of the relationship. And he said he was feeling discomfort as well. And it was a really peaceful ending. We parted ways. There were some tears on both sides, and we just parted ways. And I expressed in the book that there were some hiccups afterward. But nonetheless, in that moment, it was, I think, an accumulation of my new mentality I had derived from fitness that allowed me to make that peaceful transition and have closure.
And so since then, since the end of the relationship, did you kind of like dive into training to kind of take yourself away from any pain that you were feeling?
For sure. I don't know if it's taking away from pain, but rather looking pain head on, if that makes sense. Like, it's not very much fun at times when you have to do a really, really heavy lift and you're not sure if you're gonna clear it or not. And so I almost embrace that physical pain because it allows me to embrace my emotional pain. And I think a lot of people use fitness as a coping mechanism, as a therapy to run from their problems, but rather I use it as a therapy to embrace what I'm feeling. So usually between sets, that's when I'm dialoguing with myself the most. That's when I'm doing my most, the highest amount of introspection that I do at any point during the day is, what am I feeling right now? Like, what doesn't feel good? What thoughts am I having? So after we separated, I started training for my first powerlifting competition, and I trained for, I don't know how long. I did an unsanctioned meet that November, so it was almost a full year after the separation, and then I did a sanctioned meet about 6 months after that, and I placed first in my weight class with the full disclaimer that I was the only person in my weight class.
You showed up, nobody else did. So.
Yeah, touche. I have the medal hanging in my bedroom. I'm so proud of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of tournaments that I would kind of get first out of 2 people.
Yeah,
first out of 1, so
it still counts, right? Yeah.
I put in the work. You know,
there you
I showed
go.
up.
I'm proud of you. Yeah, that's awesome.
So, what I like to do on this podcast is kind of relate how fitness can change our lives. Mm-hmm. And I want you to kind of imagine that you never walked into that gym, and kind of try to put yourself in a place where you didn't find that kind of outlet that kind of helped build you that strength, and kind of see how things might be different.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting perspective. I don't know if, because I'm thinking back to who I was before I started lifting, and that version of myself was somebody that I don't care to ever be again. It was somebody that really had no drive and no motivation in life. It was somebody that was going through the motions. So I imagine if I never found fitness, I mean, it would be an extreme statement, but I might actually still be with my ex, because I wouldn't know that I'm capable of change. I wouldn't know that I'm capable, I'm strong enough to stand on my own. And that's an interesting perspective because I was able to get things done in school. I graduated, but to say that I was able to put my all of my energy into a project, that was a mentality that I hadn't quite captured yet. And I think fitness allows me to do that because you have to essentially silence all those thoughts in your mind and focus on the lift, because it is so difficult when you push your, I mean, we were talking about that right before we started the podcast, when you push your body to a maximum limit, everything else has to get quiet and you just hone in on this one task in front of you. And I honestly think fitness has allowed me to specialize my mentality. It's allowed me to sit down and write my book. I was able to focus on that and silence everything around me, and that was a critical thinking skill that I derived directly from my lifting. I had to learn how to focus on a task, and even those days when you don't want to be there, it's cold outside, you know, I'm hungry, there's a good TV show on, something.
So the first time we actually kind of really connected was at Iron Valley.
Yeah.
And I talked to you previously on Instagram, and before we actually had like a conversation, I was looking over it, and you weren't having the best kind of lifting day.
Oh, I wasn't?
I don't think you were, because you were just kind of, like you took your sweatshirt off and put it on and put it back off, and you were just like walking around, and
I do that.
you didn't really look like you're having the best day.
Oh, really?
So after that, we ended up having a great conversation. And you couldn't really tell that had affected you. But yeah, just kind of my observation.
That's really interesting feedback, because there's somebody else at Iron Valley that made the same observation. Maybe I need to work on my body language, because it's interesting. Usually I'm just so deep in thought while I'm lifting, and I don't think a lot of people get deep into thought when they're lifting, but it's not really a joyous time for me. It's an introspective time, and so people often think I'm really upset when I'm lifting, where I'm just like, what is the meaning of life? You know?
I'm the same way. Like, I'm used to, so I grew up working out in my garage by myself.
Yep.
So lifting weights on my own. And
right.
The thing about Iron Valley is I'm around so many like-minded individuals, and it's kind of weird for me because I'm so used to working out on my own and being in my own world. And I'm one of the crazy people who doesn't need like headphones or whatever. I'm just like so laser focused when I'm in the gym.
Yeah, I get that.
And it's been nice being around those people that that are there for you, because it's one thing to kind of try and work and get PRs on your own, but when you have this group of people just like fueling you.
I mean, your new PR this weekend is a testimony to that. 20-pound PR, oh my gosh.
Yeah, so this past Saturday, I was deadlifting with all the guys, and I just decided to throw 20 more pounds on there and go for a PR, and
cleared it.
If I wasn't there, I wouldn't have got the PR.
Yeah.
I just wasn't. And that's the thing that you kind of touched on earlier, is you're so in the moment.
Yeah.
That rep felt super slow.
Really?
Like the slowest rep ever.
Yeah.
But Zach's like, dude, that was a fast PR. I'm like, really? Like, I felt like I was going barely moving.
It's crazy how that happens, because I saw it. I was on the platform right next to you, and I mean, I didn't realize it was a PR because you made it look so flawless. And I was like, yeah, he's just killing it over here.
I almost died. That's how I felt like my soul was slowly leaving my body as I pulled it off the ground.
I've had lifts like that before, but you made it look easy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Luckily, there's no video because I turn like a bright shade of red.
I do that every time I max out. It's like bright purple. People question if I'm okay. I'm like, I swear.
Yeah, like I see very healthy veins that pop out of my neck.
Yep.
Awesome. So I wouldn't know where I would be without lifting, because I found that at a point in my life when I was, 12, and I was just hitting puberty, and I was this weak, small kid.
Yeah.
And when I started lifting, I found success in other areas of my life.
Yeah.
Like I became, more outgoing, more popular with friends. I did well in wrestling, and I saw this correlation. Like, the stronger, more I trained, the better I did at this other thing. And I would have no idea where I would be if I didn't start strength training. But at the time, I lived in Georgia with my mom, and if I didn't find that thing to make me stronger, that kind of drive to make me do things I wasn't uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
I have no idea what I do.
Yeah. So you mentioned you are a survivor as well. If you feel comfortable answering, how has lifting helped you in your healing of domestic violence?
So the strange thing with me is, at the time, I was training in mixed martial arts. I was fighting. And so when my altercation happened, I was just so shocked. Like it didn't really set in until the relationship had ended. And I haven't like even talked about this with anyone besides my wife. Just after, you know, I saw your talk, we really had, like, she knew what happened and it was abusive, but I never really went into detail. And so we had a great conversation after that. And after that relationship ended, I wasn't fighting as much, and I only had one fight with my now wife in my life.
Yeah.
And after that ended, I don't know if it was the kind of reaction from the abuse or just not having that outlet of kind of energy and kind of anger, but I became a very easygoing person. But after that, I noticed things were like setting me off. Like I had a very short fuse.
Really?
And I guess I can kind of relate that to kind of what happened with me and kind of having this bottled up emotion.
Yeah.
Because I never really let that go. And so maybe I was just carrying that around, and it was just, you know, making me quick to anger because I had all these unexpressed feelings.
Yeah.
And so until I've kind of looked at that the past few weeks, I feel like that was something I struggled with my wife because she's a very amazing person, but we're both very stubborn.
Yeah.
And when we fight, it's very explosive. And so I had never kind of really had that type of relationship. I never really gave that energy back to someone. I usually just kind of took it, and it's very docile relationships.
Yeah.
And so I felt like after that happened to me, like I didn't take things as easy as I used to. And then I was always on edge. Because of what happened, I never trusted being within like hand's distance from someone when we were fighting.
Yeah.
Because I never knew if like I was going to get hit or anything.
Right, I get that.
And so I was very on edge, and so that made me very agitated.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's something with your quirks you kind of feel as well.
Yeah.
But I just became very anxious. And I had suffered with some depression in the past, but everything got like turned up to 11.
Yeah.
Like when I was anxious, I was super anxious. And when I was angry, I was super angry. And when I was depressed, I was super depressed. And so everything just got super intensified. And like it had like this past 2 years, I've done a lot of personal growth and been seeing a therapist, and just kind of having these deep conversations with people has definitely helped kind of me separate kind of what happened to me from like, you know, what a normal type of relationship should be.
So I have to ask, because for me, personally, the altercation woke me up emotionally, if you will. The emotions were almost too much at first that I went into a state of numbness, but now I feel like I can feel life more than I've ever felt life before. So do you think that your intensified emotions were a direct result of essentially maybe a numbness that you had before the altercation, and it woke you? For me, I like the terminology, like woke me up. Do you think maybe you were able to experience emotions more, whether it be bad or good emotion?
No, I felt like I was generally in touch with my emotions. Yeah, I felt like maybe after that fact, I was angry, and so just like repressing everything, just kind of, you know, built up that pressure. And so when I would express emotion, it would be in that kind of extreme kind of range. But now, like, I feel like I'm not as angry as often. me and my wife still fight, but, you know, we can have a civil conversation where we're not, you know, barking and screaming at each other.
Right.
It's just not as intense, I would say.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. What would you say to someone who might be numb right now from a situation, and kind of let them know that it's going to be okay?
Yeah, so I specifically wrote a letter to the younger version of myself in the book, saying during her state of numbness, immediately after the altercation when I couldn't feel anything because my emotional cup was too full to feel. And essentially in this letter, I said, like, it's okay. Like, everybody wants you to act, to make some sort of move, to start healing, to do whatever mechanism you have to do in order to essentially get back to what society describes as normal. But in this letter that I wrote to the numb version of myself, I told her, like, it's okay. Like, you don't have to lift a single finger right now. You simply just have to keep breathing. Like, that's all I expect of you, is just to keep breathing. And I know it's so cliche that time heals all wounds, and I don't know if one can truly heal from trauma, because I'm still in it. But I was able to start feeling again. And I think the healing was expedited when I started investing in myself. So at the gym, academically, reframing, restructuring my support system, getting new friends that were more encouraging and less demanding, if you will. And so the numbness, when I started doing these things, and it was baby steps, the numbness slowly started essentially eradicating. Like, it was just, it evolved from like a state of inability to feel to a place of I don't think anybody's in total control of their emotions, but each day I feel like I'm transparently Michaela, and I'm able to maintain this homeostasis environment within my soul. Like, anything can happen in the world around me, but like, I'm just at peace. And there's a few times I still get anxious or like, stressed or whatever it may be, but I think there's this overall homeostatic nature about me now that I didn't have before the altercation. And so to the person that's still in that numb state, I mean, I would tell them the same thing I told myself, like, find somebody to just give you a hug, and all you have to do is breathe and maybe get a meal in or something, you know, go for a walk.
Keep breathing and eating.
Yes,
yeah.
Just the primal needs.
So that's really great. I really love that. And then, so do you still feel animosity towards Adam in the situation?
That's tricky. So in terms of the altercation, I actually do not. And to this day, I've never been angry with him for the altercation. And I'm sure there's an entire psychology of why that is. But I guess I have a lot of empathy, and maybe some people would say I'm too forgiving. So to that regard, I wouldn't say there's any animosity. There were a few hiccups, if you will, after the breakup that I think those are the ones that, I wouldn't say I'm angry, but just frustrated at the way things played out. I couldn't believe that was, I thought I had closure and had peace and I was moving on, but it wasn't the Cinderella story, if you will.
It hardly ever is.
It hardly ever is, exactly. So it was messy. There's nothing clean about it. But in a way, I wouldn't take even those hiccups back, because I think it cemented who I was as a person, but also made me realize what I deserve and what I tolerate out of life. And I look back at each of those scenarios and I just realized how much more I had to grow as a person, and also what I expect out of people around me. I have really high standards for people that I let close to me. So yeah, I wouldn't change it. It wasn't the easiest thing to go through, and I wouldn't wish it upon anybody, but survived.
I mean, I feel like, I hate when people say this, but these things happen for a reason, and you have to find, you know, the good in that reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the good in my situation is, opened my eyes to kind of what this relationship would be like if I stayed in it.
Yeah.
And so I know I couldn't, be the best version of myself if I stayed in that relationship.
And I don't know if you had this, but post-breakup, there were so many moments where I would see like glimmers of hope, like I can go back. Like, things have changed, but then one of these hiccups would occur, and it reminded me that it wasn't healthy. And I don't know if your breakup was squeaky clean. No.
So we had a very volatile relationship. Like we would fight, break up, I'd move out, and then we would reconcile, I'd move back in,
right.
And then the cycle would kind of happen, over and over. It wasn't as you painted it. Like you guys had like this great relationship, and this was like an isolated thing. This was my situation was not as great as that. So I kept going back, and I just felt like without that person, my life wasn't meaningful in some way. And I felt like I wasn't leading towards anything if I didn't have this person in my life. So I kept going back.
There was a codependency factor. Yeah.
And then so this altercation happened, and then we got back together and everything, and it just wasn't getting any better.
Really?
And some other incidents happened, and then we got to a point where we both knew that this wasn't good for either of us. And so we kind of went on after that.
Really? And did you completely sever contact at that point?
Fortunately for me, she moved back home out of state.
Okay.
And so there was, yeah. And so, like, that made it easier, but also kind of hard at the same time, because you're in this cycle and everything, it's very hard to not have this person that was in your life anymore.
Yeah.
And it was very hard to move on, and definitely affected my relationships after that as well. It's kind of those kind of patterns you kind of get into when you're in this relationship and trying to start something new, and you have all this excess baggage from previous relationships. So,
so I have to ask, because I'm still at the point where dating is still difficult for me post-altercation because of my quirks, and I hate to use that as a crutch or throw it out there, but it's really hard for me to feel comfortable around people, especially women. But you have found love post-altercation, so like, how did you know that your wife was the person for you, or the one that you would feel comfortable around?
So on paper, like, me and my wife shouldn't be together, really. We come from kind of two different kind of worlds.
Opposites attract.
Yeah,
it's a real thing.
Opposites do attract. Yeah. So she's really great at stuff that I hate doing, and I'm more of the kind of free spirit, creative type person where I don't need that structure, and I'm okay. I'm very easygoing.
Right.
Like, I could live on a beach and not have problems, and she needs I need a job, I need to do this and do that.
Right.
And so we kind of balance each other out.
Okay.
But no, we didn't have like the best first date. We had a nice Olive Garden dinner.
Breadsticks.
So that was going in my favor. We saw this movie, but it ended up being terrible.
Oh no.
It's called Place Beyond the Pines.
Never even heard of it.
Gosling. Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't recommend it.
Oh.
So Ryan Gosling, spoiler, dies like 20 minutes into this movie. And so that was the whole reason we went and saw it, because we both like Ryan Gosling, and who doesn't?
He's out in 20 minutes.
Yeah, and so he's dead, and we're just like, okay.
Yeah.
And the rest of the movie was kind of slow. I went back and I've watched it since then, and it's a decent movie, but it's like having that expectation and then
on the first date.
Yeah. And so, luckily, she gave me the chance for a second date. And the rest is history.
Yes.
So, we are currently packing for our trip to Ireland on Friday.
Shut the front door.
Yeah.
That's so exciting.
So, yeah, we just sold our home and we're like, we need a vacation.
Yes.
So we were looking at places, and she's Irish. Her family name is Michaelas.
Okay.
And that's a really big clan in Ireland. And so they settled in Nova Scotia from Ireland.
Gotcha.
So we're going back. We're going to check out Ireland.
Sounds amazing. How long will you guys be gone for?
So just under a week, so 6 days.
Okay.
So we leave Friday, we get back the following Thursday, I think.
Take lots of pictures.
I plan on it.
Ireland's on my bucket list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks amazing. The weather is like crazy. Like it's high 55, low 44 every day next week.
Interesting.
So it
Spring
keeps
jacket.
pretty, keeps pretty steady.
Okay.
So it's not as volatile as Indiana.
Much better than Indiana, actually. Yeah.
So,
I'll move to Ireland.
Yeah.
It's
It was
fine.
like 30 degrees this morning, and it's going to be 70 later, like
Cool.
40 degree.
We get all the seasons in one day.
Okay. So thank you again.
Yeah.
All your info is going to be linked in the podcast
Yes.
notes below.
Perfect.